di pipiku.
Nggak pakai handsfree.
Cek. Cek, cek, cek. Cek sound.
Hei pujaan hati, apa kabarmu? Ku harap
Ansarada's data room brings order to transaction chaos.
Perjalanan membawamu bertemu denganku, ku bertemu kamu. Sepertimu yang ku cari, konon aku juga seperti yang kau cari. Kukira kita asam dan garam, dan kita bertemu di bilangan. Kisah yang ternyata tak seindah itu. Kukira kita akan bersama, begitu banyak yang sama, latarmu dan latarku. Kukira takkan ada kendala, kukira ini kan mudah, kau aku jadi kita. Kasih sayangmu membekas, redam kini sudah pijar istimewa. Entah apa maksud dunia tentang ujung cerita kita tak bersama. Semoga rindu ini menghilang, konon katanya waktu sembuhkan, akan adakah lagi yang sepertimu. Kukira kita akan bersama, begitu banyak yang sama, latarmu dan latarku. Kukira takkan ada kendala, kukira ini kan mudah, kau aku jadi kita. Kau melanjutkan perjalananmu, ku melanjutkan perjalananku. begitu banyak yang sama, latarmu dan latarku. Kukira takkan ada kendala, kukira ini kan mudah, kau aku jadi kita. Kukira kita akan bersama. Hati-hati di jalan.
Dari kejauhan tergambar cerita tentang kita, terpisah jarak dan waktu. Ingin ku ungkapkan rinduku lewat kata indah. Tak cukup untuk dirimu, sebab kau terlalu indah. Dari sekedar kata, dunia berhenti sejenak menikmati indahmu. Dan apabila tak bersamamu, ku pastikan ku jalani dunia tak seindah kemarin. Sederhana, tertawamu sudah cukup lengkapi sempurnanya hidup bersamamu. Jika hariku lalui tanpa hawamu, percuma senyumku dengan dia. Dan apabila tak bersamamu, ku pastikan ku jalani dunia tak seindah kemarin. Sederhana, tertawamu sudah cukup lengkapi sempurnanya hidup bersamamu. Apabila tak bersamamu, ku pastikan ku jalani dunia tak seindah kemarin. Sederhana, tertawamu sudah cukup lengkapi sempurnanya hidup bersamamu. Sebab kau terlalu indah. Dari sekedar kata, dunia berhenti sejenak menikmati indahmu.
Lihatlah luka ini yang sakitnya abadi, yang terbelut hangatnya bekas pelukmu. Aku tak akan lupa, tak akan pernah bisa tentang apa yang harus memisahkan kita. Di saat ku tertatih tanpa kau di sini, kau tetap ku nanti demi keyakinan ini. Jika memang dirimulah tulang rusukku, kau akan kembali pada tubuh ini. Ku akan tua dan mati dalam pelukmu. Untukmu seluruh nafas ini. Kita telah lewati rasa yang pernah mati. Bukan hal baru bila kau tinggalkan aku, tanpa kita mencari jalan untuk kembali. Takdir cinta yang menuntunmu kembali padaku. Di saat ku tertatih tanpa kau di sini, kau tetap ku nanti demi keyakinan ini. Jika memang kau terlahir hanya untukku, bawalah hatiku dan lekas kembali. Ku nikmati rindu yang datang membunuhku. Untukku seluruh nafas ini.
Tes, cek 1, 2, 3, 1. Hey,
Ini yang terakhir.
Cek 1.
Ini yang terakhir. Takkan ku sia-siakan hidupmu lagi. Dan ini yang terakhir. Ini yang terakhir. Takkan ku sia-siakan hidupmu lagi. Jika memang dirimulah tulang rusukku, kau akan kembali pada tubuh ini. Kau akan tua dan mati dalam pelukmu. Untukmu seluruh nafas ini. Jika memang kau terlahir hanya untukku, bawalah hatiku dan lekas kembali. Ku nikmati rindu yang datang membunuhku. Untukmu seluruh nafas ini. Untukmu seluruh nafas ini. Kalau harus ku mengingatmu lagi, aku takkan sanggup dengan yang terjadi pada kita. Jika melupakanmu hal yang mudah, ini takkan berat, takkan membuat hatiku lelah. Kalah, ku akui aku kalah. cinta ini pahit dan tak harus memiliki. Jika aku bisa, ku akan kembali, ku akan merubah takdir cinta yang ku pilih. Meskipun tak mungkin, walaupun ku mau membawa kamu lewat mesin waktu. Jika melupakanmu hal yang mudah, ini takkan berat, takkan membuat hatiku lelah. Panjang perjalanan yang harus ku lalui, merelakanmu. Jika aku bisa, ku akan kembali, ku akan merubah takdir cinta yang ku pilih. Meskipun tak mungkin, walaupun ku mau membawa kamu lewat mesin waktu. Jika aku bisa, ku akan kembali, ku akan merubah takdir cinta yang ku pilih. Meskipun tak mungkin, walaupun ku mau membawa kamu. Cinta yang ku pilih, meskipun tak mungkin, walaupun ku mau membawa kamu lewat mesin waktu. hapuskan indahnya cinta kita yang tak ingin ku akhiri. Kau pergi tinggalkanku, tak pernahkah kau sadari akulah yang kau sakiti. Engkau pergi dengan janjimu yang telah kau ingkari. Oh Tuhan, tolonglah aku, hapuskan rasa cintaku. Aku pun ingin bahagia walau tak bersama dia. Oh. Memang takkan mudah bagiku untuk lupakan segalanya. Aku pergi untuk dia. Tak pernahkah kau sadari akulah yang kau sakiti. Engkau pergi dengan janjimu yang telah kau ingkari. Oh Tuhan, tolonglah aku, hapuskan rasa cintaku. Aku pun ingin bahagia walau tak bersama dia. Oh Tuhan, tolonglah aku, hapuskan rasa cintaku. Aku pun ingin bahagia walau tak bersama dia.
My nona manis, kalau nyanda cinta, kalau nyanda sayang, mana mungkin kita mau babadu subadini. Nona manis, yang kita cinta cuma ngana. Nona manis, yang kita cinta cuma ngana. Insosie rasinema wayun waburo wapurbe supo bondina. Insosie rasinema wayun waburo wapurbe supo bondina. Sondayu yang rayu kube muramu maro. Yang rayu sondayu kube muramu maro. Siero esos waswaria bake. Siero esos yaswar aurao. Insosie rasinema wayun waburo wapurbe supo bondina. Indonesia suar au-rau.
Rasa sayangnya, lihat dari jauh. Rasa sayangnya, rasa sayangnya, lihat dari jauh. Rasa sayangnya, duduk-duduk ramai-ramai, mari torang baku pantun. Mulai dari sekarang harus sopan dan santun.
Kalau ikan di dalam kolam, bunga tumbuh di tengah taman. Kalau cinta sudah dalam, jarak jauh terasa nyaman.
Rasa sayangnya, hey, lihat dari jauh. Rasa sayangnya. Rasa sayangnya, lihat dari jauh. Rasa sayangnya. Rasa sayangnya, hey, lihat dari jauh. Rasa sayangnya.
Buah mangga, buah pepaya dimakan enak rasanya. Indonesia ragam budaya, kita harus menjaganya.
Jalan-jalan naik kereta, jangan lupa pakai sepatu. Walau beragam budaya kita, sepanjang waktu tetap bersatu. Rasa sayangnya, hey, lihat dari jauh. Rasa sayangnya. Si batu manikam di pajoget, sona manik
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you to those of you who are gathered here in Auditorium Juwono Sudarsono for the next agenda of the IICCD 2025. To those of you, ladies and gentlemen, still outside, we kindly invite you to come in and gather here in the auditorium so we can continue with our next agenda, which is the plenary session 3. Once more, ladies and gentlemen who are still enjoying the coffee break outside, we invite you to come into the auditorium so we may proceed to the plenary session 3 as soon as we can. Thank you so much. and gentlemen, once again, welcome to Auditorium Juwono Sudarsono for IICCD 2025. We encourage you who are in the auditorium to fill in the seats at the front. Once again, I encourage everyone here in the auditorium to fill in the seats in the front so that there's no empty spaces left. And to ladies and gentlemen who are still outside of the auditorium, I kindly invite all of you to join us in the auditorium so we may proceed with plenary session 3 of IICCD 2025. Thank you.
Lagunya enak, merdu sekali. Capek sedikit, tidak peduli sayang. Asalkan tuang senang di hati. Palinglah enak si mangga udang sayang. Sayang disayang, pohonnya tinggi, buahnya jarang. Di sana gunung, di sini gunung. Sayang disayang, di tengah-tengah bunga melati. Di sana bingung, di sini bingung sayang. Samalah sama menaruh hati. Jalilah jali dari Cikini sayang. Jalilah jali sampai di sini.
Nenggelis pujaan engkau, nenggelis engkang hoyong tepat. Upami teu aya pamungan, langkung sae urang kenalan. Nenggelis pujaan engkang, nenggelis engkang hoyong tepat. Upami teu aya pamungan, sasi payung urang tunangan. Itu saha anu wajib borong, itu saha anu wajib bodas. Pipi koneng irung mancung palnon hidung putri banding. Nenggelis
Good afternoon, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for regathering here at Auditorium Juwono Sudarsono for the next agenda at the Indonesia International Conference on Cultural Diplomacy, IICCD 2025. May I hear a bigger round of applause? All right. That shows our energy are still up to continue to our next agenda for today, which is the plenary session 3. Ladies and gentlemen, this plenary session features the theme Cultural Meeting Spaces, Non-State Actors and Grassroots Forces in Cultural Diplomacy. In this plenary session, we will feature a discussion, or as I would say, a deeper look at how grassroots forces and non-state actors expand and redefine cultural diplomacy. Help me welcome in this plenary session our speakers, Professor Irmawati Marwoto, Professor of Archaeology at Universitas Indonesia, Professor Lilawati Kurnia, Professor of Literary Studies at Universitas Indonesia, Bapak Dave Lumenta, PhD, Associate Professor Anthropology, Universitas Indonesia, and Bapak Yani Kurniawan, Literary Agent and Founder of Literasia Creativa. This plenary session will be moderated by Dr. Field Gegerianto, Associate Professor in Anthropology, Universitas Indonesia. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the IICCD Plenary Session 3, Cultural Meeting Spaces, Non-State Actors, and Grassroots Forces in Cultural Diplomacy. Please welcome our speakers and moderator.
Okay, good afternoon, distinguished speakers, participants, colleagues, and professors. So we will have our plenary 3 session now, and we already have 4 speakers with us. And 4 speakers, I think we have already read their biodata, but not yet. So I think I will need to introduce them, but first I think I will read some of my notes that we have already arrived at the plenary session 3, and we have engaged with the issues of cultural diplomacy. And I think we are also, although I'm not particularly from the international relations field, I'm from anthropology. I think we can say that we are engaging with the themes of non-traditional actors in terms of diplomacy, in terms of how nations and states relate with each other. And we will also, with our speakers, we will engage more with this theme. We will engage with the theme of collective memory and heritage making. We will also engage with the theme of creative labor, aesthetic production, and narrative works, how they play out in the international settings, especially in related to how diplomacy works. And we already have 4 distinguished speakers. Professor Irmawati Marwoto, who will analyze how repatriation works and how it increasingly emerged as a bottom-up diplomatic interventions where community leaders, local leaders, and local museums reclaim cultural sovereignty. We will also have Professor Lilawati Kurnia, who will offer her lens grounded in transculturality and popular culture, showing how cultural diplomacy unfolds in the mundane flows of image, text, and hybrid cultural forms. We have my colleague, Devlumenta, anthropologist working with me in the Department of Anthropology, who will bring an ethnographic examination of visual culture and grassroots aesthetics. And we also have Mas Yani Kurniawan, who is the founder of Literasia Creativa, literary and illustration agency based in Jakarta, and he will give us an insight on how creative work operate in Indonesia today. We will have until 6, right? We will have until 6, and I think to have a meaningful discussion, I will allow like the presentation to last for 15 minutes. If that's good with you, I will give 15 minutes for each presenter. I think I will start with Prof. Irmawati Marwoto. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank you to the committee for having me in this seminars. I have the committee asked me to talk about the Indonesian culture repatriation from the bottom up, not from the government side. So I hope this my presentation will give you a bit of insight about how the repatriation from the bottom. Yeah, we know mostly that all the repatriation is the duty of the government. Yeah, but in fact, it is not like that. Yeah, the people from the bottom, they also trying to make their own way to repatriate their artifacts of their culture. Balik mana? Oh gitu. Now, first of all, I would like to refresh our knowledge about what is repatriation. Repatriation. A moment. Ini gimana? Nggak kebaca. Ini ya. Okay. Repatriation is broadly lagi, ya. Yang hijau. Bisa dikitin. Okay, itu ya. So repatriation is broadly understand the process of returning historical artifacts, cultural object, and heritage material from foreign collection to their country of origins. In Indonesian context, repatriation typically concern archaeological objects and collection, manuscript, and the cultural material that were removed from Indonesia during the several key periods, including large colonial and private collecting and commercial trade and in the 19th and early 20th century. Next. Now we have to see how the Indonesian artifacts left the archipelago. There are 4 at least the agents of what happened in the loss of the loss of cultural in Indonesia is, first of all, is colonial expedition. And the second is private collectors and missionary collections. And the last is anthropological and archaeological expedition. That's why that we know the latest issues that the man from Java now is going to return to Indonesia. Yeah. That's what the archaeological do in the colonial period. Next. Now, history of repatriation in Indonesia is already start from 1949 until until now, until lagi, next, yeah, okay, until now, yeah, the collection of Dubois collection that I have mentioned before is going to coming home. Next. Now, we have to know the legal framework to understand the repatriation policy in Indonesia, starting the start blood since the colonial period, and then the 1975 recommendation. It's a joint recommendation between the Dutch and the Indonesian. Next. And the laws and cultural, the other legal framework will be the cultural heritage number 5 in Indonesia and the law of the cultural heritage number 11. So there is already a legal framework for the repatriation. Next. And we have also the international instrument who's supporting the repatriation, which is the UNESCO in 1970 and the UNIDROIT 1995. This is the, now we are going to see the community repatriation in Indonesia. This is the NIAS museums. Next. Now, this is the example of the community-led repatriation in NIAS. So the people in NIAS, they have a very strong community, and they try to repatriate their cultural artifacts by themselves, not involving the state. Effort to repatriate NIAS cultural collection have largely been driven by community initiative with minimal direct involvement from the Indonesian government. One of the most active actors is the Museum Pusaka NIAS, which has consistently undertaken independently effort to trace, negotiate, and retrieve cultural objects originating from the island. So this is the baju Oroba Buaya, one of the sacred artifacts from the NIAS people. In 2007, the museum successfully secured the return of the Oroba Buaya, a traditional crocodile skin war vest from a private collector. This was followed by 2009 by the repatriation of 30 objects, including ancestral figures and pieces of traditional jewelry from the Volkenkunde Museum of Radboud University in Nijmegen, the Netherlands. today, those repatriated terms are displayed at the Museum Pusaka, NIAS. They are currently exploring the possibility of repatriating additional NIAS culture material from the institution in Germany and Netherlands, leveraging go-standing network with church community to facilitate dialogue and cooperation. Next. The second example is from Tanah Toraja. So the people have their own effort to repatriate their ancestor statue, which is called Tau Tau, ancestor effigy. In response to the inadequacy government facility, Toraja community create their own museums, mostly notably by Pongtiku Museum in North Toraja. This museum houses repatriated effigies whose originally graves can no longer be traced. In 2017, with photograph of the Tau Tau held in American museums, a young man from Cathay Kisu immediately recognized his ancestor. Depicted from a horseback, he fears the ancestor and the horse had been separated and sold as two pieces. Repatriation claim began to rely increasingly on community-driven provenance research rather than on museum archive. Alone, repatriated effigies were returned directly to the mouth of the original burial cave and locked with a metal gate to install the safeguard. This is the photo. We can see the Tau Tau, which has been taken away by the collectors. Next. This is the example from Bali. The people from Bali also have their initiated to return their artifacts, especially the topeng, with its several topeng, the sacred mask, have been returned, especially topeng Sida Karya and topeng Rangde, from the private collectors in the Netherlands and Germany. Next. So this is the example of topeng Sida Karya and the topeng Rangde. Next. Next, please. This is the example from the Banjar, South Kalimantan. Maybe this is one of the hardest, the hardest issues, yeah, which is not only the artifacts, but it's about the head of the Mang Lehman, yeah, a Banjar resistance leaders during the Banjarmasin War, was executed by hanging in Martapura and subsequently beheaded by the Dutch colonial forces. His severe head was reported taken to the Netherlands and is believed to be held in anatomical museum in Leiden. Since the early of 2000, local historian, descendants, and the provincial government also of South Kalimantan had been actively trying to secure the return of these remains the provincial government from established team to trace the skull and facilitate its repatriation to Banjar land. However, this effort is not agreed by the Dutch. This is very hurting the Banjarmasin people. I don't know, maybe the decision is concerning the diplomacy with Indonesia will be damaged, probably, I don't know. Until now, this issue of the Manglehman is hidden. Yeah. Next. So this is the Manglehman photo. And the next issue from Banjarmasin is the diamond. This is a big diamond. These artifacts have the same tragedy because the Dutch didn't want to lose the diamond. Yeah? The young people from the Dutch, the historian, they are not agree with the decision of the Netherlands government, and mostly the young people wants in Netherlands wants this go back to Indonesia. Yeah, but still this this issue from Banjarmasin is being hidden again. Next. Now we are talking about the role and significance of community-led repatriation. Community-led repatriation gave a central role to the original culture owners, indigenous community, local custodians, traditional leaders, or descendants. A community-led approach ensures that these objects return to communities that understand their meaning, can care for them appropriately, and can use them in culturally relevant ways. When community representatives has included the discussion, ceremonies, or negotiation, repatriation became personal and the relation rather than bureaucratic. This human dimension strengthened Indonesian cultural diplomacy. It showed that that Indonesia honors the diversity of people and respect the cultural authority of indigenous local group. Many objects left their communities at moments of conflict, forced conversion, military raids, and colonial pressure. Their return can provide symbolic healing for the restoration of dignity and the reaffirmation of cultural continuity. Next, please. So, what can we learn? Repatriation should strengthen a nation's sense of identity by bringing home objects that tell its stories, returning this form signal that Indonesian value its own heritage and is communicated to safeguarding it in diplomatic context. These reflect a nation confident in its cultural foundation. Repatriation also a practice form of historical reconciliation. When museum or governments agree to return cultural objects, it reflects a willingness to confront colonial history and forge more equal partnership. Repatriation also opened the door for new partnership, such as joint curatorial works, shared research project, digital repatriation initiative, and long-term museum cooperation. As a result, repatriation becomes a sustained diplomatic bridge rather than a one-time transaction. When Indonesia actively participates in repatriation effort, it contributes to a broader global movement that questions the ethics of colonial collection and advocates for a more responsible museum world. The strengthen Indonesian voices in international cultural forum. Next. Local community, regional government, and local museum often struggle to care for historical objects due to the limited infrastructure, funding, and expert. These challenges are compounded by the frequent lack of attention from national level institutions, which leaves many local heritage initiatives without meaningful support. In addition, inadequate advocacy, bureaucratic heartless, and the absence of clear diplomatic framework to repatriation at the nation level further obstruct progress. These gaps make it difficult to community-driven or bottom-up initiative not only to pursue repatriation but also to strengthen the broader cultural infrastructure. It is also important to note that repatriation is never a single straightforward act. It is shaped by competing expectations, the memorial needs of local communities, religious obligation surrounding the treatment of ancestral remains, and the education values that such objects may hold in the international museum setting. These tensions often create a complex landscape in which repatriation effort must be negotiated. The last is the epilogue. Repatriation is a form of cultural diplomacy that can restore more than objects. It restores relationship, dignity, and cultural continuity. When communities lead or actively shape the process, repatriation becomes not only a diplomatic achievement between nations, but also a profound act of cultural justice for the people to whom the heritage truly belongs. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Irmawati, compelling presentation. And I think it's something also giving us something to think about and something to discuss later. But next, I want to move to Professor Lilawati Kurnia. Professor, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mas Geger. Oke. Selamat sore semuanya. Good afternoon, everybody. I just read, so I won't be taking so much time. It is a genuine pleasure to be invited to speak at this plenary session. For those of you I haven't yet met, I am a lecturer from the Faculty of Humanities, just across from this building. My academic home is in literature, and I also guide students in cultural studies at the postgraduate level. Today, I want to build a conceptual bridge between our two faculties. To do that, I have been reflecting on a common ground that unites our disciplines. I won't be addressing cultural diplomacy in its broad mainstream or state-centric framework. Instead, slide 2, please. Okay. Where is it? Okay. Instead, I want to draw our attention to a form of cultural diplomacy that is far more ancient and fundamental, the diplomacy that occurs between people. This is a central topic in cultural studies, the analysis of everyday life and social practice. So when I say culture, I'm not referring to established institutional culture or grand national narrative. I'm talking about the organic living culture that bubbles up from daily interaction, the kind that quietly unites our diverse communities. This is the culture of the everyday, the unspoken agreements and the shared practice that have for thousands of years woven together the rich social fabric of this archipelago. It is in these grassroots, human-scale interactions that I believe we can find the most resilient and authentic models of cultural understanding. Next. To understand how nations operate on a global cultural stage today, we need to see these four elements not as separate topics, but as links in a powerful causal chain. Imagine colonialism built a house and forced you to live in it. They told you which rooms you were allowed in, what the right way to speak was, and that their decoration were beautiful, while yours were primitive. Post-colonialism is the process of taking back the keys. It's the hard work of pulling down those old ugly wallpapers of inferiority, rewiring the faulty logic, and finally putting up your own art. It's about making the language of the house your own, so you can truly feel at home in your own mind and culture. You can't just stop with the internal work. The critical shift in thinking has to spill out into the real world and becomes a national project. This is where a country rolls up its sleeves and say, okay, who are we really? So they start actively rebuilding their identity. They dig into the history that was there before the colonizer arrived. They bring their ancient languages back into schools and public life, and they start celebrating their own local hero instead of just the ones chosen for them. It's all about weaving a new story about themselves. This new national story isn't a tale of being conquered or inferior. Instead, it's a story of resilience, of deep roots, and of an identity that is truly their own. And this new self-understanding doesn't stay within borders. It becomes the raw material for cultural diplomacy. The nation strategically projects this curated narrative to the world as a form of soft power. But this is more than just branding. It is an active negotiation. They are telling the world, see us, not for our colonial past, but for our rich sovereign culture. This is our true value. The ultimate goal of this entire process is to reshape global culture. It's a bid to move from being a passive object of Western study or pity to becoming an active, respected shaper of the global cultural landscape. By asserting the value of their art, philosophy, and knowledge, they directly challenge Western hegemony. So the through line is clear. The internal intellectual work of post-colonial critique provide the fuel and the rationale for external strategic projects of cultural diplomacy, enabling nations to actively and powerfully rewrite their role of the world state. Next. For decades, the story of colonialism was told as a simple binary, the powerful colonizer versus the powerless colonized. But post-colonial theory, particularly the work of thinkers like Homi Bhabha, asks us to move beyond this rigid opposition. The first essential move is deconstruction, a critical unpacking of the colonial narrative. We must analyze the language, the laws, and the cultural claims that Western power used to justify their dominance and establish their hegemony or leadership as the universal standard. But Baba showed that this encounter wasn't a one-way street. He introduced the concept of the third space. Think of this not as a physical place, but as a psychological and cultural arena. The unstable, often tense, but incredibly productive zone where the culture of the colonizer and the colonized actually meet, clash, and interact. And from this third space emerged hybridity. This isn't just a blend mix like blending two paints. It's the creation of something entirely new and unpredictable that didn't exist before. It could be a new form of music, a new slang, a new religious practice, or a new way of political resistance that takes elements from both sides but belong wholly to neither. So identity is not a fixed, pure essence. It is fluid, contested, and constantly being remade in this third space. This process fundamentally challenges the authority of the colonizer, who demanded purity and mimicry by creating something ambivalent, slippery, and powerfully self-divine. It is in this messy, in-between space that future of culture is actually forged. Next. Language was not a neutral, sorry, this is my German accent, neutral tool, but a deliberate instrument of power. It functioned as a mechanism for control, governing through a foreign tongue, in Indonesia, of course, Dutch, creating a privileged elite, cultural erasure, marginalizing indigenous knowledge, stories, and philosophies as primitive, identity reconstruction, forcing a psychological schism, making people see their own language and culture as inferior. Political independence was only the first step. Real decolonization requires reclaiming our indigenous languages. This is not about rejecting our national language, but about deepening our liberation by returning to the source of our unique worldviews. Our local languages are living archive of ecological knowledge, ancestral wisdom, and cultural identity. To speak them is an act of healing and the ultimate resistance to centuries of erasure. Next. Now let's talk about language itself. Post-colonial theory asks a really tough question. Can we ever truly be heard within a very language that was used to control us? This brings us to a crucial point, the politics of language and knowledge. Thinkers like Spivak and Foucault help us see that language isn't a clear window to the world. It's a filter. Spivak's seminal question, can the subaltern speak, forces us to confront whether dominant frameworks shaped by colonialism ever really allow the marginalized to be heard. This aligns with what Foucault called regime of truth. Truth for him isn't just out there waiting to be found. It's manufactured within a society. It's about the rules that decide what counts as a valid statement, who is allowed to make it, and what gets labeled as nonsense. Apply this to colonialism and you see the game. The colonizer language was installed as the exclusive medium for serious knowledge. It defined what was rational and modern while systematically disqualifying other ways of knowing. Therefore, the colonial project isn't just a symbolic return to a, Therefore, the decolonial project is just a symbolic return to a native language. It is a radical act of reclaiming the authority to produce truth and meaning of our own term. Next. So, where does this leave us today? In our modern world, language has become a key tool of cultural diplomacy. It's how nations proudly assert their independence and their soft power on the global stage. Think about it. When a country actively promotes its own language, like Swahili across Africa or Bahasa Indonesia in Southeast Asia, it's not just about communication. It's a powerful symbolic act. It's a way of saying our voice matters, our identity is our own. This is decolonization in action, reshaping global conversations on their own terms. The ultimate goal here is what we call epistemic sovereignty, which is a profound idea, the right to speak for yourself and to be understood on your own terms. In this light, language is more than just words. It's both a political statement and a cultural foundation. It's the essential tool for building futures based on dignity and dialogue, not on domination. Next. So how do we understand culture in globalized world? The old maps doesn't work anymore. The massive flows of people, digital information, and capital have made cultural boundaries porous and constantly shifting. The traditional model which saw its culture as a distinct, closed box is now obsolete. To make sense of this, scholars like Wolfgang Welsch developed the idea of transculturality. This moves us beyond simply acknowledging different cultures as what we call multiculturalism, or their interaction as what we call interculturalism. Instead, it argues that our very identities are now transcultural by default. We are all products of complex global networks, and our cultures are formed through these endless exchanges. It's a framework for our interconnected age. Next. Wolfgang Welsch, one of the key thinkers on this, described contemporary culture as an open and interrelated system. His central point is powerful. We can no longer contain culture within national or territorial boxes. For Welsh, culture is better understood as a weaving, a tapestry composed of countless cross-border influences. This led to a profound shift. It creates what he calls transcultural individual. That is, people like you and me, whose personal identities are formed by multiple cultural sources. The result is that culture loses its old job as a divider of humanity. Its new role to act as a bridge connecting people across all sorts of different backgrounds. Next. So what does this mean for our very identity? Welsh also argues that our modern world identity is relational. It's not a fixed heirloom we inherit. Think of it, instead, it is something that we actively build through negotiation and through our encounters with other cultures. Think of it as cultural translation, a process where we are constantly interpreting and adapting meanings from different cultural contexts into our own. As scholars Juneja and Kurtz put it, identity isn't something you possess, it's something that is continuously created through your interactions with the world. Now let's make this real. Look at Indonesia. It's a living, breathing example of a transcultural space. Its entire history, from ancient trade and colonialism to modern migration, has created a cultural landscape that is deeply intertwined. You simply cannot separate Indonesian culture from the influences of India, China, the Arab world, the Netherlands, and even maybe United States. And here's the crucial point. In Indonesia, this blending isn't a threat to national identity. It's the national identity. It's a reflection of its historical reality. You can see it everywhere. In the infectious hybrid beats of dangdut, its rich fusion of cuisine, the evolving art of batik, the digital, globally connected lifestyle of its youth. These aren't signs of cultural decay. They are creative, adaptive forms of transcultural life in action. So the old paradigm of culture as something close, pure, and homogeneous is completely obsolete. The Indonesian experience shows us that culture must be understood as fluid, multidimensional, and constantly negotiated. It proves that hybridity isn't a bug in the system of modernity. It's a fundamental features of cultural identity itself, and it continues to evolve through our ongoing conversation. Well, I have an example, but time up.
Time's up, but probably you can provide conclusion or concluding remarks.
That's already a conclusion, but I give an example.
Okay.
Okay. Next.
Probably 1 or 2 minutes.
Yes. Let me give you a concrete example from the humanities, a powerful case of transcultural adaptation. I look at a poem by the renowned Indonesian poet Gunawan Muhammad called Journey of the Night. Now, what's fascinating is that this poem is actually an adaptation of a famous German ballad by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe called König. Goethe's original poem is a dramatic, haunting piece. It tells the story of father riding desperately through a dark forest, clutching his favorite son. According to a German folklore, the forest is ruled by a sinister supernatural king, the Earth King, who preys on those who traveling at night. The poem is unique because it's built on multiple voices, making it feel like a tense, dramatic dialogue. Now, what happened with Gunawan Muhammad bringing this to Indonesia? He doesn't just translate it, he transplants it. First, he stripped away the multiple voices. All we have is the intimate, desperate dialogue between the father and son, and the child seems older, more aware of his fate. Then he changes the scenery. A German forest doesn't fit, so he moved the entire journey to a beach. In Javanese myth, the South Coast is the domain of the powerful and feared Queen of the South Sea. So we still that myth of an invisible, deadly ruler, but it's a local myth. In doing this, Gunawan Muhammad becomes a true cultural bridge. He doesn't just copy Goethe. He builds a new artistic creation that stands firmly on both German and Javanese cultural ground. His poem becomes a work of hybridity. It weaves together a classic European literary structure with the powerful similar myth of his own culture. On the surface, these two worlds might seem incompatible, but in Gunawan's hands, they don't just coexist, but they also fuse into a single powerful and uniquely Indonesian work of art. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Prof. Lilawati. It's a wonderful presentation and, of course, a powerful metaphor with the weaving. I think it's a powerful metaphor. Next, we will have Dev Lumenta. I think the pressure is on the next two speakers to be time efficient. Do you want to use this yourself? I think you have many graphics, don't you? Or? Yeah.
Selamat sore, good afternoon. I think what I'm going to talk about has partly already been covered by Professor Lilawati Kurnia, because I think when we talk about vernacular cosmopolitanism, we're kind of also talking about transculturality. But maybe I'd like to highlight some of the discrepancies between what the Indonesian state has always practiced as cultural diplomacy and what actually is happening on the ground. Next. So maybe I start from the core arguments that there seems to be a disconnect between state-defined, what the state means by culture, and how culture is actually lived. How it is lived by normal people in daily life. The other argument is that cultural diplomacy has become increasingly identical to national branding. And I like to also argue that vernacular culture is very relational. It's actually happening between people and people. It's fluid, it's human-centric. And I like to question whether this is more effective than institutionalized construction of culture. Next. I think this history has partly already been covered by Professor Lilawati as well, because we tend to forget our historical cosmopolitanism. I'm showing a picture of Angkor Wat, because we know, although it's in Cambodia, but part of the building techniques was actually developed by importing workers from Java in the 9th to the 12th century. So we had these connections in the past. We know that Asia has been shaped by fast trading networks in the past. Cultural exchange was mostly facilitated through people, not really governments. Encounters were also driven by mobility, contingent technological infrastructures, for example, shipping. You had also various technologies that facilitated how culture was spread in Asia. We can also cover the colonial period, the post-colonial periods. And also we can look at the result. The result of all these processes was that actually the whole world has been actually full with layers of cultural hybridity that is almost everywhere, shared across diverse geographical distances at different scales. Next. And of course, now we have forgotten many of our cosmopolitan origins. Even Indonesians, we don't know much about our own cultural layers. Nobody maybe likes to talk that even the naming of days from Monday to Sunday comes all from foreign languages. Senin, Selasa, Rabu, Kamis, to Jumat comes from Arabic. And we got Sabtu for Saturday, which comes from Portuguese, but the Portuguese get it also from Arabic. And we use Minggu, which comes from Domingo, from Portuguese. Even the naming of numbers were quietly also influenced by Arabic. We also tend to forget also the Persian influence, even the word adat. We got the word adat probably from Central Asia. We used to have this long-standing Ming measurements in the pasar, in our markets. We used to use, for example, gantang, kati, pikul, which were actually measurement systems that were used during the Song and Ming periods. And I think until maybe 20 or 30 years ago, when you go to a market in Jakarta, they still would use gantang for rice. So not using kilograms, but gantang. And of course, we also, much more recently, we discovered that the South Indian diaspora has a very, in the 3rd and 4th century, has a large influence on the spread of Sanskrit and Brahmanism in Sumatra, which occurred simultaneously in southern India. So actually, the development of Brahmin culture in Indonesia was happening during the same time when it developed in southern India. We also see, for example, the gamelan's influence on other Southeast Asian musical forms to Thailand, Cambodia. It became the kolintang in the southern Philippines. And of course, we can also look at more contemporary hybrid cultural formations. Next. So this is just, in the center, you see a pack of cigarettes. I took this picture in Yangon in Myanmar. You see at least 4 Indonesian brands sold, Kretek brands sold in the Myanmar market. And it is the result when many of Burmese men worked in Malaysia as construction workers. They worked together with Indonesian laborers. And so this exchange of taste and cigarettes also occurred in the working sites in Malaysia. We see nasi goreng. This is taken in Satun in southern Thailand. We see drink, fuck and fight on the Jakarta bus. If you think of it, it's the antithesis to eat, pray and love. Fuck capitalism. Of course, we have a history of ideologies as well. And in the center, you see, this is Dayak Kenyah Longhouse in Malaysia. And of course, we like to claim that the Dayaks are Indonesian. No, they are transnational. They're actually now a transnational ethnic group. So this is just to highlight, actually, that cultural boundaries are not quite what the state likes to imagine. Next. And of course, many of our thinking about culture is quite made toxic by nationalism. Colonial categories fractured all the Asian connections. So the Dutch really didn't like to talk about the Chinese influence on Nusantara. But ironically, the Dutch, they like to talk about the Indianization of Nusantara, perhaps because it came from the West, not from the East. And of course, we tend to reproduce these colonial imaginations of space. So nation states naturalized as cultural containers. And now we'd like to talk about kebudayaan nasional, Indonesian culture, Malaysian culture, Filipino culture, which is quite bizarre. Because now we believe in this idea that culture is bounded and that it's exclusive. And then we tend to think that culture is something, we like to think it as propriety, something as a property. Next. I think I don't have to go through the many definitions of cultural diplomacy, but very often they like to define cultural diplomacy as the deliberate and strategic exchange of ideas or building connections. But of course, to promote national or geopolitical interests. Cultural diplomacy designates a policy field in which states seek to mobilize their cultural resources. So mobilizing cultural resources, you have to define it. You have to define it as a property. You have to define it that it's exclusively a national property. And I think that is problematic. Next. So this is what I have observed maybe for the last 15 years, how the Indonesian state tends to think about culture. For example, we see that some ministries, they like to think about batik. Batik berperan penting sebagai alat diplomasi budaya. So what it basically means that we would like to brand batik as exclusively ours and promote it as ours. So it's like having this inferiority complex. Because you have batik in Malaysia and Thailand, the same technologies, but no, I think we feel inferior. We have to claim that this is ours. The same as with our culinary campaigns. And around 15 years ago, there was this so-called row between Indonesia and Malaysia. Because in some of the tourism advertisements in Malaysia, they were using Reok Ponorogo, which, of course, it originated in East Java. But it was actually part of the, but because the Javanese that were brought over during the colonial times to Malaya They worked in the rubber plantations. They brought the reok to Malaya. And of course, Malaysia considers the Javanese also as part of their national culture. Javanese culture as part of their national culture. But then Indonesia got so angry, we protested against, we accused Malaysia of stealing Indonesian culture. So it's again about ownership. Next. And also interesting was that Indonesia protested, the Indonesian consulate in Malaysia protested the use of the term Indon in Malaysia. I think everybody knows that Indon is just an abbreviation for Indonesian. In Malaysia, it's Indon. And you see there's, I think on the lower left picture, you see a banner which was placed at the Indonesian consulate in Tawau, in Sabah. Jangan gunakan sebutan Indon, gunakan sebutan Indonesia. Indonesia, bukan Indon. And why was this placed at the consulate? Because all the Indonesian migrant workers in Malaysia self-identify themselves as Indon. And Indon is actually a very neutral word in Sabah, in Sarawak. And I think that our migrant labor in Malaysia, they actually know how this term is actually used in daily life. So they don't have any objections against the use of Indon. But it was actually the elites, the ambassador, and then some Indonesian in social media, yeah, that were very angry about the use of Indon. They thought it was pejorative. They thought it was derogatory. But of course, the term Indon comes actually from press, from how the press actually reported on Indonesia during the confrontasi. Every day there was something about Indonesia written in the Malaysian, Filipino, and Australian media. And they had to shorten it. It's the economics of front page design. So from Indonesian it became Indon. This is just an example how Indon was used in 1967, for example. Indon girls infected by miniskirt. So it came from the press. It was not something that was really pejorative. But of course in Indonesia it was made a big deal. So again, we have this inferiority complex against the Malaysians. In the center was just an example. When I went to a clinic in Sarawak, I went to a health clinic, and I had to state my name and also my race. And I said, I was a bit puzzled because in Indonesia we never have to fill in the race column. But they expected me to fill it in. And they asked me, are you Malay, are you Chinese? I said, I'm not Chinese, I'm not Malay. But I'm from Indonesia. Okay, if you're from Indonesia, you must be Malay. Or you must be Javanese or Bugis. No, I'm not. I said, I'm from Manado. Where is Manado? I said, in North Sulawesi. Okay, so you're like Bugis. No, I'm not like a Bugis because I'm Christian. And then they filled in Manado, race Manado, but with an Indon, again with an Indon. So this is actually this is a very vernacular context, okay, how people use Indon to identify. It's not really something that is political or pejorative. Next. So Indonesia's cultural diplomacy so far is still based on a proprietary and exclusive construction of culture. Culture is mobilized as natural branding. So it highlights exclusivity, difference, something that has to compete and jealously guarded against competing claims. So it's never used as actually to build bridges or to have this idea that culture is shared. So culture is seen as exclusive national property, not as something that is commonly shared across humanity. Next. Okay, I'm going to talk about vernacular cosmopolitanism, but it's something that I think you will all understand what it basically means. Next. So building bridges, when we talk about human-to-human interactions, we talk about, this is just a prime example. It was in Aceh, when the Rohingya refugees, they arrived in Lok Sokon in East Aceh. the local Achenese with the Rohingya, they could not speak that much. But with the males, because many of the males already have worked in Malaysia, they can speak Malay. But upon arrival, the Achenese, they were so, they felt pity because there were children on board. So on the first 2 days, the Achenese, they just wanted to bring the children home and to base them at their homes. Next. So these are two, I witnessed two kids, an Achenese and a Rohingya. They were trying to communicate. They couldn't talk to each other, but actually they wanted the Achenese kid, he wanted to play football with the Rohingya kid. And later on, they managed to form teams. So this is actually basically how cultural interaction works. Next. This is a Japanese, just as a Japanese, we know about Borneo. Borneo is known, the Dayak people are known for wearing beads. But because Borneo has never produced its own beads, so 200 years ago, all the beads in Borneo were imported from Central Asia, from China, from the Middle East. And today, actually, most of the beads that are still in circulation or sold in Borneo are actually made in East Java, in Jombang. And so you have many Jombang traders now actually living in Malaysia, in Borneo, just going from kampung to sell beads. And of course, these traders, they really learn. They really learn about the preferences of beads. They know the customs of the Dayak. So they become very cosmopolitan in Borneo. So the ethnographic knowledge is actually very wide. Next. Next. So I want to talk about some other forms of vernacular cosmopolitanisms, particularly artists. So these are just examples of organic non-state cultural networks. Maybe many of you are familiar with the debacle of Ruang Rupa, who was selected to be the curators for Documenta 2022, Documenta 15 in Germany in 2022. They were selected to be the curators, and what Ruang Rupa did was they didn't want to be considered as the sole curators, but they wanted to do the curation together collectively with many artists from the global south, with Latin America, from Palestine, and so many of the works were actually post-colonial, decolonial in character. They also invited Palestinian artists, and of course, many of the works that were on display also criticized Israel. Stop the Killings was also a response to the violence that happened, not in Gaza, because this was before Gaza, but it was responding to the Israeli violence in the West Bank. And of course, there were some anti-Israeli tropes in some of the works of Taring Padi, and then Documenta was partly shut down. Some of the works were censored because it was considered as anti-Semitic. But this is just an example because Ruang Rupa saw itself as part of a larger global South alliance against ongoing colonialism, giving a voice to the global South. And interestingly, Ruang Rupa never considered themselves as Duta Budaya. They were not representing Indonesia, they were representing the global South, so not Indonesia. Next. So these are just some examples of how Ruang Rupa actually framed the art practices during Documenta. Next. Next. Of course, we are very familiar with Indonesian writers that have actually published their works in more than 10 languages overseas. Of course, this is done without state support, but it was actually through their own ability to promote their works, find publishers abroad, and then have their works translated in different languages without state support. Next. Of course, everybody also knows many Indonesian bands have actually gone international without state support. Voice of Bache Prot, that was very famous during their performance at Wacken Festival in Germany. They went to Glastonbury in the UK. They were seen not as Indonesians, but they were seen as metal im hijab. So they were really seen as, whoa, as a different kind of representation of Islam. Gitu ya. Next, we also have Waichus and the Company, and the Couples Company, who also has a global audience through their independent networks. Just an example, this is a poster of the East Asian tour in Japan. Next. This is also interesting, another artist, Kasimin. Kasimin, he's a DJ. He explores sounds through local Nusantara sounds. He's a DJ, he creates his own music. But his networks are quite interesting. So the poster on the left is Kasimin performing in Shanghai in collaboration with Gully Rhythm, which is actually a UK club music-based label. In the center, he is art directing actually a performance at the Venice Biennale. On the right, you see Kasimin performing at the Nyege Nyege Festival in Uganda. And he also released his works in Nigeria on local labels. Next, maybe last. But also he's supported sometimes by this other kind of networks, of funding networks. He has actually traveled with the help of Refuge Worldwide, based in Germany. Next. And this is also Kasimin performing with Björk. Maybe some of you know the Icelandic artist, Björk. And Björk found Kasimin by stalking his Instagram account. And then he was invited to collaborate on Björk's latest album in 2023, 2022, and then performed with Björk. So this is actually a profile of how Indonesian artists actually have already fostered all these international networks, or what maybe Professor Lila Kurnia has already described as this new, it's actually new diverse circuits that are available to tourists, to artists, not tourists, artists, outside actually what we usually associate with arenas that the state wants to intervene. So I think this is just an example of actually that the state, how do we define the role of the state in this context? I think, for example, I think you will talk about actually the role of translating. So I think many things that the state can do, if we still want the state in, is actually to subsidize, for example, the translation of Indonesian literary works. For example, travel grants for young artists, or making visa applications more easier to invite foreign artists to come to Indonesia. So we don't have to really think of cultural diplomacy as this high level of claiming Indonesian culture, of branding Indonesian culture. I think this is already actually another way of branding what Indonesia is all about. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Dev. Out of the box as usual. And I think your presentation reminds me of saying that when government intervenes with cultural exchange, it becomes cringe. Yeah, so we're running, sanitize. We're running out of time here, so next will be Mas Yani and 15 minutes.
Okay, I'll try to make it quick. So, hello everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. So, just so cultural diplomacy through stories. So we have two professors here, a doctor and his PhD, and you have me, ST. So I'm basically an engineer, but then took drastic turns to work in publishing industry. So next slide, please. So next. So you see here the popular works of Rati Kumala, Gadis Kretek. So this is a funny story. So last month was the Frankfurt Book Fair. So I was accompanying a musical team, they call Classic House. They were invited to perform in Frankfurt. And this is just a small sample of how cultural diplomacy through literature works. So we were having a smoke break after our, so we met with our driver from the Consulate General, and then we were having a smoke break, and when this random lady passes us by and then making a U-turn and come saying hi to us. Indonesian, and we were a bit confused because what do you, how do you know we are Indonesian? So, and she immediately said, I know you're Indonesian by the smell of your smokes. It's cloves, that's cigarette. And then we made a small chat, have you been in Indonesia? Yeah, I've been there. And she quipped, garis kretek, so cigarette girl. I love that series in Netflix. So yeah, so that's a small sample. Next, please. And then this is also reflect the encounters through books, another form of cultural diplomacy. This is a title that we pitched in September in Manila. So my two friends, both from the Philippines and Vietnam, immediately pointed at the father's head. What's that called in Indonesia? Oh, we call it chapping, the conical head. We do use that as well in the Philippines and Vietnam. So it's the immediate instant connection, instant cultural connection that we make, and then sparks more discussion, more about the maritime issues and everything. So from Discover, the conversation grows. Next, please. So yeah, so this is what usually happens in the publishing ecosystem. So small encounters, lasting impact. So micro stories like the chapping, the kretek, and then networking, recognition leads to dialogue, and then networking, and then build relationship, and then we kind of like promoting Indonesian titles abroad. So you heard about Garis Kretek, you should know about these other authors. So that is what we're trying to push. Next, please. So yeah, so this is what happens. Master Dave already mentioned it earlier during his presentation. So this happens outside the ministry. This is like the similar forums between agents and translators and curators. We're talking what's hot, what is the ongoing issue, what is happening in our country, and then what is the global trend now, and what works that can reflect on that, and then from there we can try to find similar interests, and then trying to see if that we can find one or two titles that can fit into that narrative, and then trying to get them published abroad. So this is what you can see is the Asian Forum in Frankfurt Book Fair, and then the center picture is the London Book Fair, where Indonesia was the market of focus in 2019. And this is what's happening, but usually happen in the right center when people try to pitch titles to one another. Next. Now, this is when Indonesia was like the Blackpink of ASEAN, where this is our highest point when we have like the National Book Committee, the operator. So Indonesia have continuous presence in London, Bologna, Frankfurt, Beijing, Sharjah, Abu Dhabi. So as you can see, this is a statistic for the title that is being requested to be reviewed and the titles that being sold. So this is the trajectory. The trajectory is like showing positive trends, but this is only recorded up until 2019, because that is when the new cabinet comes in 2020. So as you can see, the conversion rate is good, within 40%. It is 40-30%. So this is actually a good number. So we're seeing more and more Indonesian titles being translated and published abroad. Yeah. Next. So I want you to remember this. So this is our usual stand in Frankfurt Book Fair. So this is 10 by 12 meters, so 120 square meter. It's quite big. Next, please. And this is usually what happens during our happy hour. So people comes for food and coffee. So crowded, so many people love Indonesian presence over there. But then after this is our problem is started. Next. So this is the booth that you see now is what we have in Frankfurt this year. It's only 2 by 2 square meter. This system stand. We no longer have like the national stand. We no longer have official presence as a collective stand in anywhere. Not in Frankfurt, not in London, not in Bologna, not in Beijing, nowhere. So this is basically because the change of minister, and then the new minister doesn't think that this is now his priority, so he decided not to continue with the policy. So the National Book Committee got suspended, and there is no transition plan and no contingency plan, and then the right sales, the number of Indonesian titles be translated and published abroad plummeted immediately. So next slide, please. So this is, but the good thing is that now we identify that there's a growing recognition that now rather than going abroad to like Europe, rather than going to Frankfurt, London, or these other places, this growing acknowledgement that, okay, this is, I think, we think that this is the good time to like work with your ASEAN neighbor. So the statistics that we showed you earlier, the numbers of content that being translated into foreign language, the most buyers is actually Southeast Asian countries. So from a literacy perspective, we license the most is to Vietnam, Singapore, and the Philippines. So we also, I'm also part of the Tim Promosi Sastra team. So with the Ministry of Culture, and now we are proposing some kind of Southeast Asian anthology, so sea stories. So this collectively we can like networking as a region, not just like individual country. Not like Indonesia, but Indonesia also can be present and also representing the Philippines and Malaysia in a form of anthology. So next, please. Now the good news is there is a science of renewal. So Indonesia will be the guest of honor in the Abu Dhabi International Book Fair next year, to 2026, in April and May. And then the Ministry of Culture established the Indonesian Literature Promotion Team, which is a think tank consisting of myself, Ratih Kumala, Esa Tegar, and Weda Stratesti. So we kind of make the roadmap of where Indonesia should go, what kind of cultural strategy that we can try to push in promoting Indonesian titles abroad. We also, next month, we will launch the Read Indonesia portal. The printed format is what you can see on the right bottom. That is our first edition. You can download it in readindonesia.id. So that is the website. You can download the digital edition there. And then what you see in the lower left is the lab literary ecosystem lab. So that is a new batch of literary agents. And Indonesia also prepared a new batch of literary translators. And then this year, during the Indonesia International Book Fair, the ministry also launched the MTN translation grants, which just announced. So the translation grants is going to the ministry is going to make the translation grants available again for the foreign publishers that would like to translate and publish Indonesian titles, just like you touched earlier, Mas Dev. So hopefully in the near future we will be seeing much more Indonesian titles being translated and published abroad. So next. So why I think literature or books can be cost-effective diplomacy. For example, if we're talking about from the budgeting side, if you're going to make a movie, it can cost like up to 10 to 30 billion. That kind of budget is enough for a small team to be present in various international book fairs, complete with delegation, of course. And book also have long life cycles, although the minus is like, it is not immediately feasible like movies and films, because book has to go through a more lengthy process because we have to translate it. It can took like normally usually 12 until 18 months to translate the book. And then it's a perfect for cultural relationship for what we think is a modest investment. So next. So yeah, this is, I think, what the Indonesia must do next to ensure a policy continuity. So a perfect example is how the South Korea tackles this issue by having several agencies handling the book promotion. So you have KPIPA, an agency that handles South Korean publishers' presence in various international circuits, and then you have the LTEK, Literary Translation Institute of Korea, who support with the translation grants. So anyone here that's read Hankang, vegetarians? In the colophon page, you will likely see that the translation is supported by LTE Korea. So that is one of the strategy, cultural diplomacy strategy that Korea they done their groundworks, and then they ensure that the policy is long lasting without, so whoever sitting on top, the policy will continue. So another one is funding residencies, both outside and inside, and then of course translation program, and invest in recurring exchange platform and regional networks. So that means like in Asian now, Manila have this, Indonesia has the Indonesia International Book Fair, Manila has the Manila International Book Fair, also have the like rights exchange platform. Now Indonesia have the IRF, and Manila have the ARF. So this is a good opportunity, I think, that we can optimize to push more our titles abroad, but now more regionally rather than going to Europe and like playing in already condensed market. Next. Yeah, so this is the titles that we have. So this is the book that already published that has a minimum the English translation. So literature enables slow and durable diplomatic encounters, although not done by the government official, rather than editors and readers, and then from small stories form long-term relationships. And I think it is time that our government took more serious effort to recognize and treat literature as one of these strategic cultural infrastructure. So yeah, so I think that concludes my presentation. So keeping it like 50 minutes. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you, Mas Yani. It's a really interesting insight from an insider view from the book industry and related to, of course, the cultural exchange, our team. And unfortunately, even though we already have 4 wonderful presentations here, I cannot take any question, because if so, we will need to extend the session until probably 7. So I will need to close the discussion now, and I don't know if something can be put as a closing remark for this session. I really hope that this session provide provoking thoughts, something that you can consider for the tomorrow session. Okay, I thank the speakers once again, the distinguished speakers, and also the organizers of this session. I hand the floor back to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gegerianto, for leading the discussion for plenary session 3. Thank you also to the speakers for the very fruitful insights. I invite all of our speakers and the moderator to stand on the center of the stage as possible. Perhaps 2 on the left and 3 on the right for a group picture. So 2 speakers on the left and 3 on the right for a group picture. In 3, 2, 1. Once more. In 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give a big round of applause once more for our speakers and moderator for plenary session 3 of the IICCD 2025. Ladies and gentlemen, you may return to your seats. Ladies and gentlemen, with the conclusion of the plenary session 3, day 1 of the IICCD 2025 has officially come to a close. On behalf of the entire team, I would like to once again thank you to our speakers, panelists, presenters, and moderators for their thoughtful contributions, and all of you for your active participations and discussion. As we wrap up, dinner has been prepared for you outside of the auditorium. Please feel free to take out the dinner with you and enjoy it at your convenience this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, tomorrow we will have day 2 of the IICCD 2025, where you can find the agenda and detailed information on the screen on my left and right, as well as in your program book. We will be starting with morning coffee at 8:30, continue with parallel panels. Once again, you may find the information on the big screens on my left and right, as well as in the program book. We look forward to continuing our discussion on the many dimensions of cultural diplomacy. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Romy Sianturi. Thank you so much for being a part of today's conversations. Enjoy your dinner, and I will see you, ladies and gentlemen, tomorrow. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good night.